On the Sunday it happened, I was coming home with groceries in the back seat and a receipt tucked into my coat pocket. It was the kind of quiet morning that usually passes without leaving any mark. I remember the red light turning green, the heater humming low, and the paper bag beside me sliding a little when I moved through the intersection. Then the SUV hit my driver's side hard enough to turn the whole world white for a second. I stayed awake. That is the part one remember most clearly. The taste of metal in my mouth, the powder from the airbag, the way I tried to pull in one deep breath and couldn't get all of it. I looked at the dashboard clock without really meaning to. 10:31 a.m. By 11:40 that morning, my younger sister had posted a photo of my parents at brunch with the caption, "Best parents ever." I did not say anything when I saw it. I just looked at the screen, then at the hospital ceiling, and then I put the phone face down. 3 weeks later, a woman I had never met called me from an unfamiliar number and said, "I was there when your mother saw your name on her phone." That was when I understood there was more to learn. The accident happened in Columbus at the corner of Bryden Road and Nelson. Nothing unusual about the route. I had gone out for coffee beans, fruit, a few things for the week. I worked as a critical care nurse across town, and Sundays were usually the only mornings that felt slow. I liked those small errands. The grocery cart wheels, the cold air walking back to the car, the plainness of it. I had the right of way. The other driver ran the light. When the paramedics got to me, one of them leaned through the broken side window and asked me simple questions in a steady voice. My name, my age, what hurt. I told him my chest. I could hear sirens somewhere behind him and smell coolant and something burnt. A woman in a navy coat stood on the sidewalk with both hands over her mouth. Someone else said, "She's awake." They asked who to call. I gave them my parents' numbers immediately. No hesitation. My mother first, then my father. Those were still the names listed as my emergency contacts, the same names that had been there for years. The ambulance ride to Riverside Methodist took a little over 10 minutes. I watched numbers without really seeing them. A monitor beeped beside me. One medic kept checking my oxygen and telling me to stay with him. I remember fluorescent lights moving overhead when they rolled me through the doors. I remember a nurse adjusting my blanket. I remember someone cutting away part of my sweater. They thought I had broken ribs. Then they started talking about a collapsed lung, then possible internal bleeding. A nurse named Elena recognized the hospital badge clipped inside my bag and asked where I worked. I told her the Westerville campus. She nodded once and squeezed my wrist like that explained everything. Hospital people know how to do that. No long speech. Just enough pressure to say, "I see what's happening." She told me they were calling my family. I believed her. For a while, I kept watching the clock over the doorway. 10:58, 11:06. 11:14, I called from my own phone when no one came. My screen was cracked across one corner, but it still worked. I called my father first. It rang and went to voicemail. Then my mother. Same thing. Then again. Then again. Alina used the desk phone too, because calls from an emergency department tend to get attention. She left a message with my mother at 11:18. Then another one at 11:32. Her tone changed the second time. More direct. More urgent. Nobody called back. Between the hospital and me, we tried them over and over in less than an hour. I left 3 voicemails. In the second one, I was crying without meaning to. Not from panic exactly. More from the effort of trying to breathe and talk at the same time. At 11:40, my phone lit up with a notification from Instagram. My sister, Lauren Mercer, had posted a bright brunch photo from a place called the Copper Fig. My parents were in it, smiling into the camera with champagne glasses on the table. Her husband was there. Their kids were there. The caption was cheerful and ordinary. The location tag was clear. I opened maps and checked the distance from the restaurant to the hospital. 2.3 miles. 9 minutes. I remember staring at that number longer than I should have. My chest hurt. The room smelled like antiseptic wipes and warm plastic. A cart rattled somewhere in the hall. Elena came back in, saw my face, and didn't ask what was wrong. She just adjusted the blanket again and said they were taking me for another scan. At 11:49, I left the 3rd voicemail for my father. After that, everything became more procedural. Oxygen, imaging, consent forms, a doctor speaking in short, careful sentences. I had enough medical knowledge to understand the words they were choosing and enough pain to wish I didn't. No one came. Then I waited. I spent that first night in a hospital room that was quieter than the ICU rooms I was used to. There was a soft hiss from the oxygen line, the low hum of the vent in the ceiling, footsteps passing now and then in the hall. My room was dim except for the light over the sink and the monitor beside the bed. I watched the numbers without caring much what they were. The procedure had gone the way they hoped. Chest tube placed. Bleeding controlled. No immediate complication. Those were the words I held onto because they were clean and technical and easier to manage than anything else. What I could not manage was my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Nothing from either parent. Nothing from Lauren. At some point after midnight, I opened her brunch post again. I did not know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I had not imagined it. My mother was smiling with her chin tilted toward the light. My father had one arm around her chair. My sister looked polished and pleased, like she always did in photos. There were pastries on a tiered stand, a basket lined with white paper, mimosas bright as traffic lights. I zoomed in until the image turned grainy. Then I put the phone face down. The next afternoon, they discharged me. I signed my paperwork alone, listened to the nurse go over restrictions, and said yes when she asked if someone would be home to help me. That part was not true, but it moved things along. I took a rideshare back to my apartment and carried my own overnight bag upstairs one step at a time because lifting it hurt more than I expected. My neighbor, Dana, had left a small bag on the doorknob with crackers, 2 bottles of water, and a note in neat handwriting. Text if you need anything. I'm home. That was the first thing that made me cry. Not loudly, just quietly with my coat still on. Around 6 that evening, my mother finally sent a message. Lauren just told us you were in a little accident yesterday. Are you okay? Why didn't you call us? We would have come. Love you. I read it 3 times. Then once more. Why didn't I call you? I had called 16 times. The hospital had called too. I could still hear Elena's professional voice in my head, calm and precise, leaving those messages. There was something almost impressive about the sentence my mother had chosen. It erased the entire day in one neat motion. It replaced what happened with something easier to carry. I did not answer. An hour later, my cousin Tessa sent me a screenshot from a family group thread I had not been in for months. My father had written, "Mara had a car accident yesterday, but she's okay. We found out late because she didn't want to make a fuss." That's just how she is. Independent as ever. He had already turned it into a personality trait. I sat there on my couch with a heating pad against my ribs and understood something small but final. They were not only absent. They were editing. They were moving pieces around so the story would still leave them looking kind and me looking self-contained. That was the first moment I stopped thinking in feelings and started thinking in records. I made a folder on my phone and named it with a date. Then I started saving everything. Call log screenshots. The brunch post. The location map. My mother's text. My father's message to the family. I saved each item twice, then uploaded copies to cloud storage. I did not have a full plan yet. I only knew that memory was too soft for this, and I was done handing them soft things. The truth was, this pattern was not new. The accident only made it impossible to excuse. It had been forming for years, slowly enough that each individual moment looked harmless. My sister would need help with the kids, so family dinner moved. Her husband had something work-related, so the holidays started earlier. A school program, a soccer photo day, a birthday breakfast, a recital, a themed party, a preschool event. Everything bent around her life. My schedule was treated like weather. Inconvenient, but expected. I worked long hospital shifts. I swapped weekends. I came straight from work in scrubs under a coat, hair still smelling faintly of antiseptic soap and hospital air. I showed up tired and on time, or tired and slightly late, and both were somehow counted against me. A couple of years earlier, when I was promoted to senior charge nurse, I called my mother from the parking garage after my shift. I was tired and happy and still holding the paper packet from HR. She said, "That's nice, honey," and then cut the call short because she was helping Lauren compare preschools. When Lauren's husband got promoted at his insurance office, there was a dinner. White tablecloth place. Full family. I found out afterward from photos. At Thanksgiving the year before the accident, my mother told me they were keeping it small and child-centered. I was not invited to dinner, but Lauren's in-laws were. I noticed other things too once I stopped making excuses. A group text that continued without me after I was removed by mistake. A holiday schedule shared with cousins that never reached me. Comments about how I was so strong whenever I absorbed some new disappointment without arguing. Strength in my family often meant being quiet enough to neglect. By the end of that week, my body was healing in the ordinary, uncomfortable way bodies do. Bruising changed color. Sleeping was awkward. Standing up took planning. But mentally, something had become very clear. They had received the calls. They had chosen not to answer. And afterward, they had chosen a cleaner version of events. 3 weeks later, on a cold Sunday evening, an unfamiliar number with a Boston area code came across my screen while I was eating soup at my kitchen counter. I almost let it ring out. Instead, I answered, and a woman I had never met said my name carefully, like she was trying not to damage it. Then she told me she had been at that brunch. Part 3 of 7, her name was Nicole Harris. She said she knew my sister through a parents' school group and had been invited to brunch that morning almost at the last minute. Her voice was careful, a little unsteady, like she had practiced what she wanted to say and still did not trust herself to say it cleanly. I stood at the kitchen counter while she talked. The soup had gone cold. The dishwasher made its usual low-clicking sound in the background. Outside, someone was scraping ice off a windshield in the parking lot. Nicole said, "I didn't understand what I was seeing then. I do now." I asked her to start from the beginning. She did. She told me they were seated near the window at the Copper Fig. My parents were on one side of the table, my sister and her husband on the other, children near the end. She remembered the light on the glass, the noise of silverware, the server refilling coffee. Then my mother's phone started buzzing. My mother looked down at the screen, then turned it slightly toward my father. Nicole said she saw my name. Not maybe. Not sort of. She was sure. I asked what happened next, and she was quiet for a second. Then she said my mother sounded irritated, not worried. She told my father it was me again. My father looked at the phone and said, "She can wait. We're not dealing with this here." I did not interrupt. Nicole kept going. She said my sister leaned in and said, "Please don't let her pull this today." After that, all 3 of them put their phones face down. No one got up. No one stepped outside. No one called back. They ordered another round of drinks. They stayed through the meal. Nicole left shortly after 1 and remembered the time because she had to pick up one of her daughters. I thanked her for telling me. That was the first thing I said. Not because I was calm, exactly. More because I knew if I let myself speak too soon, I would lose the sequence of things I needed to hear. Then I asked a different question. "Would you be willing to write that down?" "Yes," she said, immediately. I already started. By the time we ended the call, she had sent me a message with her full name, number, email, and a summary of what she remembered. 20 minutes later, a longer statement arrived in my inbox. She included times as best she could estimate them, where she had been sitting, and one detail that mattered more than she knew. She still had the brunch receipt image from a group expense app because my sister had sent it around after. The timestamp covered the full table from 10:56 a.m. to 1:12 p.m. That put them there the entire time. I downloaded the statement, saved the image, and added both to the folder. Then I opened my laptop and made a simple list. Step 1, confirm the hospital contact record. Step 2, preserve my call history and voicemails. Step 3, build a clean timeline using only items that could be verified. That was the shift. Not emotion. Not confrontation. Order. The next morning, I requested my records from the hospital. I knew exactly what to ask for because I had helped patients do the same thing before. Full chart. emergency department notes, intake times, contact logs, procedure consent, nursing notes if available. I submitted the form, attached my ID, and waited. While I waited, I worked through smaller pieces. I exported my call log from my phone provider account. I saved the metadata on the voicemails I had left for my parents. I took screenshots of the map distance between the restaurant and the hospital at the same time of day to keep traffic estimates reasonable. I wrote down every time point I remembered before memory could blur it. Accident, ambulance arrival, air intake, first outgoing call, nurse message, second outgoing call, Instagram post, transfer for imaging, consent. I did not add interpretation, just entries. When the hospital records arrived, I opened them at my dining table with a cup of tea I forgot to drink. The envelope paper was stiff and cool from the mailbox air. I went through everything once for content, then a second time for sequence. Page 4 was the part 1 needed. Emergency contact notification log. 11:18 a.m. attempted contact. Mother. Voicemail left. Severity communicated. 11:32 a.m. attempted contact. Mother. Voicemail left. Condition escalated. Family requested urgently. 11:46 a.m. attempted contact. Father. Voicemail left. Critical injuries communicated. The notes were brief, but they were enough. No adjectives. No debate. Just the system doing what it was built to do and recording that it had done it. I scanned the pages and saved them in 3 places. Then I made the timeline. I used a plain spreadsheet. No color coding. No dramatic labels. 1 column for time. 1 for event. 1 for source. I entered everything in order and attached the supporting file name next to each line. By the time I finished, the day looked less like a family misunderstanding and more like a set of matched coordinates. 10:31 a.m. collision. 10:44 a.m. ambulance arrival at hospital. 11:03 a.m. first call to father. 11:07 a.m. first call to mother. 11:18 a.m. hospital voicemail to mother. 11:32 a.m. second hospital voicemail to mother. 11:40 a.m. sister's brunch post. 11:46 a.m. hospital voicemail to father. 11:49 a.m. third voicemail from me. 12:36 p.m. procedure prep. 1:12 p.m. brunch receipt closed. I leaned back and looked at it for a long time. The facts had a shape now. Clean. Stable. Hard to move around. A few days later, my mother sent a message about Christmas Eve dinner at their house. Turkey, potatoes, cousins, gift exchange, usual time. She added a heart at the end and wrote, "We've missed you." I looked at the message, then at the spreadsheet still open on my laptop. Then I typed back, "I'll be there. I have something I need to bring." After that, I closed the computer. Then I waited. The days leading up to Christmas Eve were quiet on purpose. I went to work. I came home. I kept my follow-up appointment. I answered practical messages and ignored everything else. My parents sent ordinary texts the way people do when they are trying to return a room to normal without moving any of the broken furniture. My mother asked whether I was bringing dessert. My father sent a joke about holiday traffic. My sister reacted to one group message with a string of tree emojis. I did not correct them. I did not explain. Silence was more useful than argument. At home, I kept things simple. I cleared off my dining table and used it like a work surface. Laptop in the middle. Printed records stacked on the left. Phone charger, notepad, speaker on the right. In the evenings, the apartment smelled faintly like tea and the eucalyptus rub I was still using for the soreness in my chest. Sometimes I could hear Dana's television through the wall. Sometimes just the heat kicking on. I made rules for myself. Only facts. Only items I could verify. No speeches. No improvising. Then I built the order of what I would show. Step 1 was the call log, because it answered the first lie cleanly. I did call. Repeatedly. Step 2 was the restaurant post and the map, because it fixed them in a place and time. Step 3 was the hospital contact log, because it removed any chance that they could claim ignorance. Step 4 was Nicole's statement and receipt image, because third-party confirmation mattered. Step 5 was my voicemail, because I wanted the room to hear what they had chosen not to hear. I practiced the sequence twice, not in front of a mirror, nothing dramatic like that. Just seated at the table, clicking through files in order until I could do it without rushing. I also tested the small Bluetooth speaker I had bought from an electronics store near the hospital. Nothing fancy. Just clear sound, good battery, easy connection. The point was not to make a scene. The point was to keep control of one. On December 24th, I dressed the way I usually do for family dinners. Dark jeans, soft gray sweater, low boots. I packed my laptop, the speaker, the printed documents in a slim folder, and a charger. I left the apartment a few minutes later than planned because I stood by the counter checking the folder one more time. Call log, screenshots, hospital record, statement, receipt image, all there. My parents' house looked the same as it always had in December. White lights along the porch rail, wreath on the front door, warm yellow windows. Through the glass beside the entry, I could see the tree in the living room and the reflection of people moving around it. For 1 second, it all looked so familiar that I almost felt disoriented. Then I picked up my bag and went inside. My mother answered the door with flower on one sleeve and that bright, hosting smile she used when relatives were watching. She hugged me carefully and said, "You look much better. I'm glad that little accident is behind you." I said, "I'm healing." That was all. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary, butter, and the cinnamon candles she always lit too early. Coats were piled on the spare bed. My uncle was laughing in the den. My cousins were opening bottles of sparkling water in the kitchen. My sister, Claire, stood at the island arranging appetizers in a fitted green sweater, moving crackers from one tray to another like the angle of each one mattered. When she saw me, she smiled too quickly. "Merry Christmas," she said. "Merry Christmas." Her husband gave me a small nod from across the room and looked away. I set my bag in the hallway near the stairs, exactly where I could reach it without drawing attention. Then I moved through the house the way I always had, saying hello, taking a glass of water, answering simple questions. "How's work? How are the ribs? Are you back on full shifts yet?" I answered in short, plain sentences. The adults filled the silence around me themselves. At one point, Aunt Denise touched my arm and said, "Your dad told us you were stubborn as ever, trying to handle all that alone." I looked at her for a second and said, "That's not exactly what happened." She gave a small awkward laugh, like maybe she thought I was joking, and turned back to the kitchen. Dinner was called a little after 6. Everyone moved toward the dining room in the loose, noisy way families do when they've repeated the same ritual for years. Place cards were set out. My seat was halfway down the table between two cousins. My father stood at the end with one hand resting on the chair back, waiting for the room to settle. The table looked beautiful. Polished silver. Linen napkins. Candlelight reflected in water glasses. My mother had even put fresh cedar down the center runner. For a moment, the only sounds were chairs scraping and the soft clink of forks being adjusted. Then my father raised his glass. He started with the usual things: family, gratitude, another year together, health, blessings. His voice was smooth and practiced, the same voice he used at anniversaries and retirement dinners and every holiday where he expected the room to stay gentle. Then he looked at me. "And we're especially glad Mara could be here with us tonight," he said. "After that little car accident last month, it's good to have her back on her feet. She scared us, but that's our Mara. Always independent. Always handling things on her own." There were a few warm nods around the table. That was the moment. I set my napkin beside my plate and stood up. No one spoke. My mother looked at me first, then at my father. My sister's hand stopped halfway to her glass. I said, very calmly, "Before we eat, I need to correct something." Then I reached for my bag. I brought the bag to the table and set it on an empty chair beside me. No one moved. The room had gone still in that particular way family rooms do when everyone senses a private rule is about to break. My father gave a short smile, the kind meant to smooth things over before they wrinkle. "Mara," he said quietly, "this can wait." I looked at him and said, "That's what you said the day I was in the hospital." The room changed after that. Not loudly, just all at once. I took out my laptop and opened it. I had already turned off notifications, dimmed the background, arranged everything in one folder in the order I wanted. My hands were steady. That surprised me a little, even then. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to correct the record." No one interrupted. I turned the screen so the people nearest me could see it, then angled it enough for the rest of the table as I spoke. First, I opened the call log. This is my phone record from Sunday, November 30th. Between a little after 11 and just before noon, I called Mom and Dad 16 times. I scrolled slowly. 8 calls to Dad. 8 calls to Mom. No answer. I let that sit for a second. I did not fill the silence. My family has always rushed to fill silence. I no longer felt responsible for helping them. My mother leaned forward in her chair. "Honey, I raised one hand. Not sharply, just enough. "I'm not finished." Then I opened the next image. It was my sister's brunch post on the television at the far end of the room. I had connected the laptop before dinner while everyone was moving between the kitchen and living room. The screen lit up with the photo from the Copper Fig. White plates, orange drinks, my parents smiling, Claire smiling, caption visible, timestamp visible. This was posted while I was in the emergency room, I said. The location was 2.3 miles from the hospital. Several people turned to look more closely. One of my cousins picked up her phone, probably checking the map for herself. My uncle's face tightened, but he did not speak. My sister pushed her chair back an inch. "You're doing this now?" "Yes," I said. "Now is fine." I opened the map screenshot next. Restaurant to hospital. 9 minutes. While I was calling and while the ER was calling, you were here. My father's voice came out rougher this time. "We didn't know it was that serious." That was the sentence I had expected. So I opened the hospital records. The paper copy made a soft sound when I laid it on the table, but I kept reading from the digital scans so everyone could see the timestamps enlarged. This is from Riverside Methodist. Emergency contact log. I read it exactly as written. 11:18 a.m. attempted contact to mother. Voicemail left. Severity communicated. Then the next entry. 11:32 a.m. attempted contact to mother. Condition escalated. Family requested urgently. Then the third. 11:46 a.m. attempted contact to father. Critical injuries communicated. No one at the table touched a fork. My mother had gone very pale. "I didn't hear. You heard enough to know it was the hospital," I said. And even if you didn't listen to the first message, there were more calls. There were voicemails from me too. My sister stood up then. "This is unbelievable. You're making Christmas dinner into some kind of trial." I closed the records and looked at her. "No, I'm making the story accurate." She sat back down, but hard, her chair legs scraping against the floor. Then I took out the printed statement Nicole had sent me. I did not wave it around. I just held it flat in both hands and read from the page. "A woman named Nicole Harris was at your table that morning. She wrote this statement and gave me permission to use it." My sister's expression changed before I even started reading. That was the first time anyone at the table looked afraid rather than defensive. At approximately 11:25 a.m., Laura's phone began buzzing repeatedly. She looked at the screen and said, "It's Mara again." Richard looked at the phone and said, "She can wait. We're not dealing with this here." Claire said, "Please don't let her pull this today." The room was so quiet I could hear one of the kids moving in the den. I continued. They placed their phones face down. No one returned the calls while I was there. I left shortly after 1 in the afternoon. Then I set the paper down and placed the receipt image beside it. Nicole also still had the group payment record from brunch. It closed at 1:12 p.m. My Uncle James looked directly at my father then and said, very softly, "Tell me that's not true." My father didn't answer him. He was looking at the table. I picked up the Bluetooth speaker next. This, I said, is the second voicemail I left. The one from 11:34. My mother whispered my name. I connected my phone anyway. When the audio started, my own voice filled the room in a way that felt strange and distant, as if it belonged to someone standing outside the house. Breathless, broken, trying to stay coherent, asking for help, saying I couldn't breathe right, saying they were talking about surgery, asking them to come. No one moved while it played. When it ended, I disconnected the speaker and put it back in the bag. Then I said, "That voicemail was left while you were finishing brunch." My aunt had tears on her face. One of my cousins put both hands over her mouth. Claire was staring at me with the kind of anger people use when shame is starting to corner them. I stayed standing. I went into a procedure alone. I woke up alone. And the next day you told the family I hadn't called because I didn't want to make a fuss. I opened one more screenshot. My father's message to the family group. Independent as ever. I looked at him. That was not confusion. That was a lie. No one tried to argue after that. They reacted, of course. My mother started crying. My sister said I was humiliating everyone. My father tried twice to speak and stopped both times. But no one actually challenged the timeline because there was nothing left to challenge. The facts were already in the room. And finally, so was I. After that, everything moved in the plane, human way difficult things usually do. No one flipped the table. No one stormed into a speech. The room simply lost its shape. My mother cried into a folded napkin. My father sat down slowly and kept one hand over his mouth. My sister said I was being cruel, then said I was being unfair, then stopped when she realized those words had nowhere to land. My Uncle James stood up first. He looked from my father to my mother and then to Claire, like he was checking whether one of them might still say something that would make sense of it. No one did. One of my cousins pushed her plate away untouched. Another left the room with the children. I was grateful for that. They did not need to hear any more of it. My father finally said, "We made a terrible mistake." It was the first honest sentence I had heard from him about that day. I nodded once. Yes. My mother tried to speak through tears. We didn't understand. We thought maybe you were upset, or there had been some kind of misunderstanding, and then the hospital said critical, I said. She closed her eyes. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The records had already done the work. The call log, the timestamps, the statement, the receipt, the voicemail. None of it needed my anger to make it real. My sister stood up again, this time with both hands flat on the table. You could have talked to us privately. I looked at her and said, "You had weeks to tell the truth privately." That ended that. The room stayed quiet after that. Not peaceful, just stripped down. People looked at the tablecloth, at their hands, at the documents still lying under the candles. My Aunt Denise asked if the hospital really was that close to the restaurant. One of my cousins, without waiting for anyone to answer, checked her phone and said, 9 minutes. My father flinched at that more than he had at anything else. Because numbers do that. Numbers remove the last soft edges. 16 calls. 3 hospital messages. 9 minutes away. Still there at 1:12. Procedure prep before that. Those were not feelings. They were measurements. My mother said, "We want to make this right." I put the printed statement back into the folder before I answered. "You can't make that day right." No one objected. I packed the speaker, then the records, then the laptop charger. I zipped the bag slowly, the same way I would have packed after any ordinary dinner. That small bit of order mattered to me. I did not want to leave looking undone. My father stood when he saw me reaching for my coat. "Mara, please don't go like this." I paused long enough to put one arm into the sleeve. This is how it already was. That was the truth of it. I had not created the break. I had only stopped standing over it and pretending it was a rug. As I walked toward the front hall, my cousin Tessa came after me first. She touched my elbow lightly and said, "I'm sorry." My Uncle James followed and said if I needed help with anything practical, rides, paperwork, insurance, any of it, I could call him directly. Both offers were quiet. Neither asked me to soften what had happened. Behind us, in the dining room, I could hear my mother crying harder now. I could hear my sister saying my name in that warning tone she had used since we were teenagers whenever she wanted me to absorb something for the sake of peace. I kept walking. At the front door, I turned back once. Not for a speech. Just to say one clean thing. I'm not discussing this tonight, tomorrow, or next week. If you contact me, keep it to practical matters. I'll decide later whether anything else is possible. My father nodded like a man agreeing to terms he did not think would ever be offered to him. Then I left. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting my chest a little when I breathed in. The porch lights were still warm behind me. Across the street, someone had a paper star hanging in their front window. Everything looked normal in the way neighborhoods do while people's lives are changing indoors. I sat in my car for a minute before starting it. My phone began vibrating almost immediately. First my mother, then my father, then my sister, then 2 cousins, then an aunt. I turned the phone face down in the passenger seat and drove home through nearly empty streets. By the time I got back to my apartment, there were more than 30 messages waiting. Some were apologies. Some were explanations. Some were only versions of please answer. My sister sent one that said I had humiliated everyone and ruined Christmas. I read that one once and deleted it. The others I kept. Not because I wanted more evidence by then. The truth was already settled. I kept them because they showed the sequence continuing in the same pattern. First denial, then discomfort, then concern once other people had seen it too. Over the next 2 days, my parents sent longer messages. My father left a voicemail I saved but did not return. He cried in it. He said they should have come. He said they had been thoughtless and selfish, and there was no excuse. I believed that part more than anything else he had said so far, because at least it did not try to tidy itself. Still, belief was not the same thing as access. I did not answer. Instead, I created one more folder. This one was called After Christmas. Then I put the phone away, made tea, and sat in the quiet until the kettle's smell and the steam had softened the room again. The week after Christmas, I cleaned my apartment one drawer at a time. That is what I remember most clearly now. Not the dining room, not the silence after the voicemail played. Just small things returning to order. Folding dish towels, watering the plants on the window ledge, throwing out old receipts, wiping down the kitchen counters while the kettle warmed. My ribs still hurt if I moved too fast, so everything happened slowly. That helped. I kept going to work. I kept my follow-up appointments. I answered emails about insurance and left anything emotional untouched. My parents sent cards, messages, apologies. My father's voicemail sat saved in a folder with the others. My mother asked twice if we could meet for coffee. My sister never apologized. She only asked why I had done it that way, which told me she still did not understand the difference between truth and embarrassment. So I stayed with my rule. Practical matters only. In January, I started seeing a therapist recommended by one of the nurses I work with. Her office was on the second floor of a brick building near a bakery, and every time I went there the hallway smelled faintly like coffee and paper. On the 3rd visit, she asked me what had changed after all those years of overlooking things. I told her the answer was simple. I stopped calling neglect by nicer names. She nodded, wrote something down, and let the room stay quiet for a minute. That quiet helped too. The family did what families often do when they don't know how to hold the truth all at once. Some people went still. Some became more kind than before. Some tried to make me responsible for everyone's discomfort. A few relatives reached out privately just to say they believed me. Uncle James checked in without pushing. Tessa mailed me soup and crackers with a note that only said, "No need to answer this." That was thoughtful in a way I noticed. My parents kept trying in their own way. Not perfectly, not consistently, but they kept trying. I did not block them. I also did not invite them back into places they had not earned. That turned out to be calmer than I expected. Boundaries, once I stopped treating them like punishment, felt more like furniture. Solid things. Useful things. They gave the room shape. By February, I was sleeping better. I started taking short walks on my days off, mostly near the river trail where the ground was flat and the air felt sharp and clean. I bought another plant for the living room. Then another. Dana laughed when she saw them lined up by the window and said my apartment was turning into a greenhouse. Maybe it was. I liked that. One Saturday morning, Nicole texted and asked whether I wanted to meet for coffee, this time without any documents involved. We sat by the front window of a cafe and talked about ordinary things for almost 2 hours. Her daughters, my shifts, books, the strange habits people keep when they're tired. It was one of the nicest conversations I'd had in months because it asked nothing from me except presence. That mattered more than I expected. I do not know what will happen with my family in the long run. I mean that honestly. Maybe one day there will be a conversation that is careful and real and not built around making things look better. Maybe there won't. I can live with either version now. What I know is smaller and steadier than that. I know who came when I needed help. A neighbor with crackers and water. A nurse who squeezed my wrist and kept calling. A cousin who sent the screenshot. A stranger who decided the truth should not stay hidden. People I did not have to beg. Lately, I've been thinking about how often there is one person in a family who gets assigned the job of understanding everything. The one who adjusts. The one who waits. The one everybody assumes will be fine because they have always been forced to be fine. I am noticing those people more now. At work. In conversations. Even in the way a friend will laugh off something that should not have been asked of them. Maybe that is the next thing I'm learning. Not just how to protect my own peace, but how to recognize when someone else has been trained to abandon theirs. Tonight, my apartment is quiet. The dishes are done. My lunch for tomorrow is packed. There's tea steeping beside me, and the plants by the window need to be turned toward the light before I go to bed. It is a very ordinary evening, and I am grateful for that. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. If it meant something to you, I'd be glad to have you here again, so please like the video and subscribe. In the comments, tell me what city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. And when this ends, 2 popular stories will appear next for you to listen to whenever you're ready.